The dusty sun sank low over the frontier town of Rusted Creek as 19-year-old. Lena Harper stood trembling on the wooden auction platform, her wrists shaking, her eyes burning from holding back tears, and her heart pounding so fiercely she feared it might burst. She had never imagined her life would come to this moment. Her father's debts piled too high, the drought ruining the crops, and the sheriff arriving with the brutal truth. Pay what you owe or surrender your daughter to be sold as an indentured bride. Men crowded around, whispering, judging, bidding, as though she were livestock. Lena kept her eyes down, gripping the fabric of her old blue skirt, refusing to let them see how terrified she truly was. The auctioneer's voice boomed, echoing off the wooden buildings. Virgin bride, 19, strong, capable. Starting bid $5. But the men hesitated. Times were hard, pockets were empty. Silence fell, an awful, humiliating silence, until a deep, steady voice from the back cut through the air like a knife. $3. Gasps rippled across the crowd. The auctioneer blinked, confused. $3? Boy, that's an insult of a bid. But the voice responded with calm authority. It's all I've got, and more than any man has offered. Today, the crowd parted, and Lena finally looked up. A tall cowboy walked forward, black hat, dust-coated boots, dark coat, and eyes sharp enough to hush an entire saloon. He placed 3 worn-out dollars on the table without a flinch. People murmured, some mocking, some curious, but none dared challenge him. The auctioneer, desperate to conclude the sale, slammed his hand down. Sold! And just like that, Lena Harper's life no longer belonged to her. The cowboy stepped onto the platform, offering his hand, but Lena recoiled instinctively. No man had ever touched her besides her father. Name's Colt Maddox, he said quietly. I ain't here to hurt you. She didn't believe him. How could she? Sold for $3? Her entire future decided by a stranger's pocket change? He guided her gently off the platform. But the moment her boots touched the ground, Lena burst into tears, collapsing to her knees in front of the waiting crowd. She sobbed uncontrollably, the weight of fear, shame, and uncertainty crushing her from all sides. Onlookers muttered cruel remarks, accusing her of dramatics. Colt ignored them. He knelt in front of her, not to claim her, not to touch her, but simply to lower himself to her level. But Lena misunderstood. She thought he was about to grab her, brand her with his ownership, force her into whatever fate he had purchased her for. No! She screamed, her voice raw and breaking as she threw her hands up defensively. The entire town froze, watching. Colt did not move. Instead, he slowly removed his black gloves and placed them on the ground beside him, palms open to show he meant no harm. Lena, he said softly, the storm in his voice melting into a gentleness she didn't expect. I didn't buy you to own you. I bought you to save you. She blinked through her tears, confused. He continued, his voice steady but filled with something like pain. Your father's debt collectors wanted you for far worse things. I couldn't let that happen. Lena shook her head, unable to understand. Why would a stranger spend his last dollars on her? Colt glanced at the townspeople, disgust flickering in his eyes. Nobody else stepped up, he said. So I did. He slowly extended his hand again, not demanding but offering. You ain't my property. Lena, you can walk away right now if you want. She stared at his hand, trembling. Freedom after being sold? She didn't know whether to trust him or bolt into the desert. But when she looked into his eyes, steady, patient, unexpectedly kind, something inside her hesitated. Her breath still shaking, she whispered, Why me? Colt bowed his head slightly. Because $3 ain't much, he said. But it was enough to keep you safe for one more day. And so began a story neither of them expected. 2 strangers bound not by a purchase, but by a choice that would change both their lives forever. The wagon ride out of Rusted Creek was quiet except for the creaking, wheels and Lena's soft, uneven breaths as she tried to make sense of what had happened. Every few minutes she glanced nervously at Colt, who rode beside her without saying a word, his gaze fixed on the horizon. She expected him to reveal some hidden cruelty, to prove her fears right, but instead he kept a respectful distance, making certain she had space in the wagon. even offering her his coat when the evening chill swept in. Still, trust was a fragile thing, and Lena's heart was too bruised to hand it over easily. When they finally reached Colt's ranch, a modest place, surrounded by quiet fields and a white fence in need of paint, he helped her down and stepped back, giving her room to breathe. "You can stay here tonight," he said. "Guest rooms in the back. Door locks from the inside." The way he said it made her look up. Most men in town would laugh at the idea of a woman locking a door. Colt said it like a promise. She watched him feed the horses, check the barn, and prepare a simple dinner. He spoke little, but when he did, his words were gentle, practical, never intrusive. Yet the question that had burned in her chest since the auction refused to fade. Finally, after hours of silence, she approached him cautiously. "You paid $3 for me," she whispered. "What do you expect in return?" Colt paused mid-stir, set the pot down, and sat on the edge of the porch. "Nothing," he said simply. Lena frowned. "Nobody does something for nothing." He nodded. "You're right. I didn't." She stiffened, bracing herself, but Colt's next words shattered everything she thought she knew. "I saw myself in you." She stared at him, confused. Colt took a slow breath. "When I was 15, my ma died. My pa sold me to a railroad crew for $10 worth of whiskey. $10 was all I was worth to him." His voice didn't crack, but his eyes did. Lena felt a chill crawl up her spine. Colt continued, "I worked 2 years under a man who treated us like animals. But one day a rancher bought me out for $5. I thought he did it to own me." He lifted his gaze to hers. "Turns out he did it to save me." Lena's breath caught. "So you did the same?" Colt nodded. "If I walked away today and left you with your freedom, that'd be enough." The sincerity in his words shook her. No one had ever done anything for her without expecting something in return. Not her father, not the townsfolk, certainly not the sheriff who handled her like a burden. She didn't know how to react to genuine kindness. That night Lena lay awake in the small guest room, Colt's coat around her shoulders. She listened to the wind against the windows, the distant howl of wolves, the faint thump of Colt pacing downstairs. She thought of how he knelt in front of her in town, not as a master, not as a buyer, but as a man trying to calm a terrified girl, a man who offered freedom instead of chains. Morning came with warm sunlight stretching across the fields. Lena stepped outside to find Colt saddling a horse. "You leaving?" she asked, heart skipping. Colt nodded. "I'm taking you back to town. If you want to go your own way, I'll see you off." She hesitated, staring at the dirt beneath her boots. Part of her longed for freedom, another part dreaded facing the world alone. "And if I stay?" she whispered. Colt paused, fingers tightening on the saddle strap. "Then you stay as a guest, not as a wife, not as someone owned." Lena stepped closer, her voice barely audible. "But you bought me." Colt met her eyes with a firmness that made her chest ache. "Lena, $3 didn't buy a bride," he said. $3 bought a chance to rewrite a life." Slowly, she reached out and touched his arm, not out of fear, but out of trembling trust. "I don't want to go back," she whispered. "Not today," Colt nodded gently. "Then you stay." And for the first time since the auction, Lena felt a weight lifting from her chest, a fragile, delicate hope blooming inside her. A hope that maybe, just maybe, being bought for $3 wasn't the end of her story, but the beginning of one she finally had the power to write.